Hi, I'm Rabbanit Jennifer Geretz's husband, and I'm here today to show you how to make schnitzel. One of the challenges of being a Rebbetzin is work-life balance and finding the proper work-life balance. And actually, to tell the truth, really the struggle is not so much to find work-life balance as much as it is to find work-work balance, because you are not necessarily going to have a life as a Rebbetzin. Most rabbis work in Avodat HaKodesh, and unless they're willing to claw their way to the top, it's unlikely that they are going to be making much above the median income. And therefore, the burden is going to fall on you to be the major wage earner in the couple. And aside from being the major wage earner in the couple, the burden is also going to fall upon you to cook tasty meals for Shabbat, and your spouse will likely come home from shul on Friday night with unexpected guests, and you're expected to serve tasty meals in large quantities. I'm here to help you with a couple of tips on how to streamline your cooking process so that you can accomplish that goal. So I'm going to make schnitzel, and what I do is I buy, because I'm fortunate in this community to be able to buy thin sliced chicken breasts. And the other thing about cooking with chicken is every surface that the raw chicken touches is subject to contamination from bacteria, and we want to be able to reduce that as much as possible. So I am going to actually take this chicken and put it in a Ziploc bag, and one of the reasons that I buy the thin sliced chicken is so that I don't need to slice the chicken thin in my own kitchen, thereby getting a cutting board and a knife contaminated with raw chicken. It's not sufficient to wash them. Ideally, you would also bleach them to sanitize them after using them with raw chicken. So the number of dishes that you can reduce that you have to sanitize will make your life easier. So I'm taking these thin sliced chicken breasts and I'm throwing them in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag. And I am going to now wash my hands. And because I'm washing my hands in the sink, when I'm all done cooking, I'm going to need to bleach the sink out when I bleach out the bowl that I'm going to be using for breading the chicken. Now, the next step here, I actually need to thank my brother Rafi for bringing this method to my attention many years ago when he was in college. And that is, rather than using raw egg that's beaten as a coating for chicken before breading it, he taught me that you can use mayonnaise. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in a good bit of mayonnaise. And also, to make it a little more tasty, I'm going to put in some hot sauce, maybe a tablespoon or so, to taste. This is red hot. It's called red hot, but really it's pretty mild. You can get much hotter sauce if your tastes go that way. Again, if you're cooking for people who are going to show up as unexpected guests, I would be careful about making food that's too hot and spicy. And then I'm just going to kind of close the Ziploc bag and smush this around until the chicken is well coated with the mayonnaise. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take panko, and I'm going to put a good amount of panko in the bowl. I am pretty generous with this, and I usually have leftover which has been contaminated with raw chicken, so it needs to be thrown out. I would much rather have too much than have to go wash my hands in the middle of this operation and add more panko into the bowl. So I'm generous with it. I put in a good amount of seasoned salt and also a fairly generous amount of garlic powder to flavor the breadcrumbs. If you're preparing this for somebody who is gluten-free, you can use cornflake crumbs, or you can even, we've done this before with pistachios, raw pistachios that we've ground up in a food processor. You can, pistachios don't stick as well because they don't absorb, but cornflake crumbs work well, and pistachio crumbs are certainly acceptable. Now that I've got this, I'm going to take the chicken one by one, and I'm going to just put it in the panko and make sure that it is covered with panko, and then I'm going to put it on this plate, which I have covered with a piece of parchment paper to keep it from getting contaminated. Now, some people will tell you, just take the panko and throw it in the bag and smush it around. I've done that, but in my experience, this doesn't really take that much longer. And when you throw the panko into the bag, you end up getting like this gloppy panko all over everything. And the chicken doesn't seem to bread as well. I'm just going to continue doing this. Now, this step, you can actually do in advance and then cover it with plastic wrap and refrigerate it. And when you're making schnitzel, it is better, and this is actually true of anything that you're breading like this, to cook, to fry, it's better to coat it and let it rest for a while than to coat it and drop it right into the oil. So at this point, I haven't even started heating the oil, and I'm not going to heat the oil until I'm done making this video, because I don't want to have the pressure of oil heating up and possibly causing a fire while I'm fiddling around with YouTube. And since this is done in advance, you can cover it with plastic wrap and refrigerate it. On Shabbat, if you're making this for Shabbat, it does not make such a difference because you're going to be frying in advance and keeping it warm on a blech, or serving it cold. It's not awful cold, but it's better warm. It really tastes best right out of the pan. So if you're making this for a weekday, you don't have to do everything right at the last minute. You can prepare this a couple of hours in advance, have it on a plate in the refrigerator covered with plastic wrap, and right before when you're ready to serve dinner, you can put a pan of oil on the stove and fry the chicken up and have really yummy schnitzel fresh fried. When you fry this, it's important that you not put the schnitzel in the oil until it starts to sizzle immediately when you put it in the oil. And I'm done here. So we're going to talk a little more, and then we're going to be done. You need to heat the oil. One way of checking the oil to see if it's hot enough is to take one of the pieces of schnitzel and just dip a corner into the oil and see if it starts to sizzle right away. If it starts to sizzle right away, then it's ready to go. And because you've done this all in advance before frying it, you don't have the pressure of tending to the chicken in the pan while you're trying to bread the additional pieces of chicken. And if it doesn't sizzle, then wait a little longer and let the oil heat up. I have never had a problem with having a fire in the kitchen because once the oil reaches the temperature, I turn the temperature down. If, God forbid, you do have the oil catch on fire, the way to put out a fire when oil catches on fire is to put a cover on top of the pan to deprive it of oxygen, which will put out. Don't try to pour water in it. You're going to get the fire spread all over. You can use a fire extinguisher. That'll make a mess. If you put a cover on the pan, then you'll be able to put out the fire without making a huge mess. And it goes without saying, if you feel that you are not in a place where it's safe to do so, evacuate, make sure that everybody else is evacuated, call 911 and let the fire department deal with it. I'm not advising you to try to put out a fire that you can't handle. In any case, safety is more important than trying to put it out yourself. Call the fire department, they'll be able to get you out of it. As long as you don't overheat the oil, you should be okay. That's it, quick and easy schnitzel. Took me maybe 2 minutes, aside from talking to you on the video. And this is really tasty. You can make it in large quantities. And this is a quick and easy recipe, go-to recipe when you're expecting large numbers of people for a meal. I wish you, since I'm preparing this video in Chodesh Nisan before Pesach, I wish you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, even though the recipe that I prepared is obviously made with panko and obviously not a kosher for Pesach recipe. Again, this is Rabbanit Jennifer Geretz's husband with quick and easy cooking tips for Rebbetzins.